Thanks for joining us. In this week's episode, we've got something exciting. This episode is a prelude to what we've got coming up in the next couple of weeks, where we are heading up to Cape York. Team from MDC, taking a bunch of caravans and some special guests along with us. We're going to visit Fraser, all the way up to the tip of Cape York, and find some exciting tracks along the way. But before we go, we're actually doing a shakedown trip. So the purpose of why we're here today, we're spending an overnighter, checking out the van, one of the vans we're going to take, and make sure it's up to scratch for the punishment that we're going to put it through. We want to show you how strong these vans are, what they can achieve, and why we support them with our full off-road warranty. If you don't know what a shakedown trip is, essentially it's a familiarisation with yourself and the van and considering how you're going to be using it for an extended period of time while you're on the road. Could be as useful as just for a weekend away, or in our case, what's going to be a 3-week trip. Little things along the way can really cause frustration if you're repeatedly doing it every day. So the purpose of the shakedown trip is to set yourself up, work out what works for you, where you're going to store things, how you're going to access them, and making sure things are working before you actually hit the road. This is really important because it's going to make the difference between a comfortable, enjoyable trip or getting out on the road and realising you've got some repairs to do along the way. It's not fun for anybody and it chews up valuable family time or just spending time enjoying what you're out there to go and see. This van's been to the Cape last year and it's about to go back. So we needed to make sure that everything's operating, and we actually discovered the bearings needed replacing. So we did that in the factory before we actually left on our trip today.
Flashback.
Part of the pre-trip inspection that we do for any trip, whether it be even just a weekend away or even a long-term trip, is make sure we check over the fundamental components of the driveline on the Caravan. This then actually gets used quite a bit and the bearings are shot. So prior to heading out on the road, we've been lucky enough to catch that, and we're actually replacing them right now before we head out. It's going to add another hour or two to our departure time, but it's going to be safer and better in the long term. The other things that we check as part of the standard procedure on the driveline components are greasing up the grease nipples for the bushings on the suspension trailing arms. What this does is greases in here in a protected seal, pushes grease out to the bushings to stop premature wear of those plastic mounts themselves and make sure they get long, sustained use and without wearing prematurely. The other thing we're going to check while we're under here, and you can do this in your garage just on a trolley or laying on your back, it's easy enough. Making sure the handbrake lines, there's no obvious damage to any of those, so just a visual inspection. You can see a couple little scuffs on this that might have been clipped by a rock or something like that along the way. There's nothing in there that really is going to cause any concern, so we're happy with that. We're then going to move to the brake drums and make sure the brakes are operating correctly. We're going to do that by testing the brake unit itself when it's on the ground, making sure it locks up and there's no unnecessary movement. And we're just going to listen to make sure that they're set properly so we don't have to pull the brake lever excessively. And if we do need to make any adjustments, we can do that through the adjustment cable up the front. If it has been a long time between getting your brakes serviced, it may be worth pulling off the whole drum itself and making sure the brake pads haven't worn through too much. Finally, the other thing we check here is making sure there's no wear on the actual bolts, on the wheel nut bolts themselves. And we want to check for play in the bearings. So with the brake drum removed, what you can actually see now is the brake assembly in here. This is the electronic brake and the actual brake pads around the outside. So just a quick visual inspection, we can see we've still got a bit over 5 mils of brake pad on there. So they're working perfectly fine. We can also adjust the tension of the brakes if we need to make any more serious adjustments. And that's done through the access point behind the brake unit itself. Up here's the stub axle. This is where the bearings are mounted. If you do a bearing service, it's important just to have a look at that, inspect it for any damage or scouring or anything like that, and then just assess it with a qualified mechanic before you want to proceed out on the road.
End of flashback.
We're going to keep an eye out for things like how the trailer's behaving behind the car. So in just a small little lap around the block, we can start, before we leave, we can start to feel, is the trailer behaving the way it should be. We're going to pick up things like tyre pressures, which we should check anyway before we take the trailer out. We're going to feel for suspension behaviour, make sure it's doing what it needs to do. We're going to pay attention and listen. We've got the window down. We want to listen for things like any creaks or hitch movement, and feel for any hitch movement that perhaps we weren't expecting or we haven't heard before. Simple little checks that if you slow down and pay attention, you'll be able to pick up before you actually hit the road. So the trailer might have been sitting around for a couple of months. You might have used it at Christmas. We're now in July and we're going to head out. Now in this case we're heading north up to Cape York. We're pulling it out, we haven't touched it for 6 months. We want to check things are working correctly. Make sure there's no corrosion in your power connections. Is the 12-pin connection charging and providing charge communication to the actual Caravan itself? Is the Anderson plug providing the 50 amp connection to the batteries and making sure the battery's charging? Making sure things like your water tanks are full, making sure you have some packing in the van to make sure the weight distribution is representative of what you're taking away. Not saying you have to pack everything, but just have it representative to what you're going to be traveling with so you can feel and make sure you're picking up on anything that's going to be relevant by the time you hit the road. We've just made it up to the top of Governor's Chair Lookout at Spicer's Gap, but before we go check that out, we're going to do a quick walk around the van while we're here to make sure everything's working. We've done a check on the indicators, the brake lights, also the driving lights. Don't forget those. Turn your headlights on and make sure the driving lights around your van are actually illuminating correctly as well. It's a legal requirement as well if you're driving at night. What we've also got, we want to check out is, we want to make sure that all the things that we've talked about on the way up, things like the hitch, suspension, tyres, they're all tracking as they should. We actually greased up the hitch this morning to make sure it was lubricated, it was going to move freely, and that's been performing great on just some of those rocky little bumpy roads on the way up. We also want to make sure the handbrake's going to be securely fastening and arresting the vehicle properly. That way we don't have too much play in the line and it's going to secure it and stop it from rolling away. We always recommend securing the van with chocks as well when you're parked up at camp, just in case there's any failure with the emergency brake itself. One of the other benefits of doing a shakedown trip like this is when you're going to pull up at camp and you're going to chock the wheels, things like that, you want to make sure you've actually got those components packed. You want to make sure those spare parts or accessories are available and you know where they are. We'll check out those when we get to camp, show you how they're used and why you need them. But let's go check out the lookout. Check this out, this is Governor's Chair Lookout. I've actually never been up here, but that is the scenic rim. Lake Muggera behind us. Way off in the distance, you can see Brisbane. It's a nice clear day. I can't imagine what this will be like in the morning with the sun coming up in the east. I reckon that's what we'll do. We'll park up at camp tonight. It's Origin night, so we'll probably try and sneak in a bit of footy somewhere, but we're gonna come up here for sunrise, have a coffee. What a good way to start the day. One of the things to keep in mind when you're monitoring your state of charge and the charging current from your vehicle or any charging device into the Caravan. Because the battery management system may be rated to charge at 50 amps, it may not consume 50 amps or require 50 amps of charge at that time. You may have other devices running, they will consume power while it's charging, and at the same time, depending on the state of charge of the battery, it will self-regulate to ensure that it only pulls the current that's required. So as you are reaching a higher capacity of your battery in its state of charge, the amperage draw will reduce, so you may not be seeing a full 50 amps, you may be seeing a lower amp rating being fed into the battery. All right, so we've been sitting here for about a minute and we're now getting a full 24 amps of current charging the battery. That's also indicated with the charging icon on the app itself. So we now know that we're getting the right trigger from the 12-pin plug to activate the charging system, and the 50 amp Anderson plug is providing that DC current connection to the battery to charge it. We're all good to go. One of the first things you should do as part of your pre-trip inspection is check the wheels and tyres for safety. Jack the vehicle up, grab hold of the wheels at 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, give them a bit of a lateral shake. If there's any movement, that could indicate your bearings might be worn. Grab it again at 6 and 12 o'clock, and again, give it a bit of movement. Any movement there should require you to have a look and inspect the bearings. Moving on to the wheel itself and the tyre. First thing you should check, your tyres have probably been sitting around for a few months. You may not have driven the vehicle for a couple of months. Grab yourself a quick and easy pressure gauge and check the tyre pressures before you hit the road. We want to be aiming for around 50 psi. These are sitting at 51 psi right now. One of the other things we're going to do is check the nuts on all the wheel studs. The Fort 9 here uses a 21mm. And we don't just want to check it for hand tightness, we want to check it to the specification. So equip yourself with a 1/2 inch drive torque wrench, which can take up to, in this case, 140 Newton meters. Don't just grab any torque wrench off the shelf, make sure it fits within the specified torque rating that you need for the Caravan. By applying it, we simply just want to make sure, do a checkup of each of these nuts to the point that the torque wrench caps out, says they're all at spec. We'll follow a star pattern around here to make sure we're tightening the bolts and pressing the wheel evenly up against the hub. The torque rating required is indicated on the drawbar of your particular Caravan, and you'll see the star bolt pattern to check when you're tightening up the studs themselves. One of the other things is do a visual inspection of the tyre. If you're doing a lot of off-roading, it's not going to be uncommon to see chips, tears, things like that on the actual tyre tread themselves and on the sidewalls. And make sure you check around the back and check the insides as well. They can easily get chipped and scraped on that side too. The point being, we want to make sure that if there's any thin areas on the tyre, we capture that before we hit the road and the tyre pressures heat up and cause stress on those weak points. You also want to do a visual check on the tread thickness and make sure it complies within the legal limits. One of the other simple things, but something never to forget, is actually the purpose of the dust cap on the hub and the wheel itself. It's a pretty simple, understated and probably often forgotten component of the van, but it plays an essential role in keeping water out to a certain level and certainly keeping the dust at bay around the bearing and critical parts of the hub itself. These are actually fixed on by 2 Allen key bolts. So make sure you carry a set of small Allen keys, and so you can actually get this off in the event that you need it. It's actually a really good idea to keep some of these on hand. They're a relatively fragile part. If you do have a rock strike, they're very easily cracked and broken. Again, remember to carry the Allen key so you can actually get them off. But look, they're a relatively cheap and inexpensive part. You can visit and get them off the online store, off the MDC website. And look, hey, it's better than doing what Daniel Easton from the MDC and OzRV owners groups did, and have to do a bit of bush fix with a coffee cup. So small price investment could save you a lot of time and mucking around. So prior to heading out, one of the other things you want to do is make sure all the components are actually functioning, all the accessories that are on your Caravan, whether it be things like the awning, the windows, the latches, the dust seals. We're going to check all those now and make sure they're doing their job and they're primed optimally. There hasn't been any damage that's occurred to them, perhaps while it's been packed away or if you packed up in a hurry last time. So as we look around the awning, we want to make sure all these bolts are tight. We can run around these with an Allen key, just make sure that they haven't rattled loose and they're going to drop a pin somewhere along the way. These are little things that just through wear and tear, corrugations and shaking, things might just shake loose over time. We want to make sure all our things, the actual seals on the awning itself are all sealed, they're doing what they need to do, and there's no visible damage or holes that might have occurred along the way. This doesn't just apply to the 270 awning on the Fort 9, this applies to all the awnings. There's nothing to say a stick might have fallen through it overnight and you haven't noticed. You don't want to be out in the rain and find out there's a big hole in your awning. That's why we do these pre-trip checks. Moving around to the side of the van, we want to look at the storage compartments, which includes both baggage storage, but also the kitchen and fridge areas too. We don't want dust in these vans, so that's why we've got the triple seal dust protection on them. What we want to look for, purpose of the Shakedown, we can actually see we've built up a bit of dust through our drive, but as you can see on the inside, it's actually perfectly dust free. So what we want to do is do a bit of a visual inspection. I'm actually feeling this to see how supple it is and make sure it's still going to provide plenty of adequate squish, let's call it a technical term, squish when we actually close it up to provide a good quality seal. These are actually compression locks as well, so when we turn them, they actually close up, and you can see when they lock, they pull that latch in to provide the strong compression seal and keep the dust out. So storage compartment 1, storage compartment 2, which is fantastic. We can see a little bit of dust around the outside there, but that's what it's for, to keep it out. Really happy with that. And when we've checked all the other compartments, including around the windows too, we want to make sure they're sealed as well and operating effectively. We're going to move on to checking the hot water system. So if you haven't run your hot water system in a little while, you're going to need to follow some pretty simple steps. We've actually got an instructional guide on running the Truma hot water system on another video, but in this case, it's pretty straightforward. We've removed the exhaust cover from the outside. We've gone and turned on the gas and made sure the gas is plumbed into the kitchen. And why is that important? Because it makes sure the gas is being bled through the lines and is actually also feeding through to the system. It equalises the pressure across the whole system. We've also made sure the hot water is running. The pumps are turned on and the water is running to feed the hot water system itself. So now it's a matter of turning on the system itself. If it's successful and fires up, we'll hear a tick. If it doesn't fire up, you'll get a red light indicating you have to turn it on, check the gas feed, check the water feed, and try it again. So we'll turn it on. We're confident it should work. Turning it on to 60 degrees. We've got a successful click. There's no light on. We're comfortable the hot water system will be warming up. We're going to keep an eye on it and come back and check on it shortly. We've tested the hot water system. Now we're coming inside, and being winter, Queensland doesn't get too cold, but it has been a bit fresh. We want to check the diesel heater. So on the circuit board inside, we want to make sure the diesel heater is actually switched on and activated. And we're going to come down to the unit, following the startup procedure, turn the unit on, sit with it, let it run for a bit. It will start cold, the fan will start blowing cold air, but it's a sign that it's actually starting to kick in. You want to make sure you've obviously got diesel in your tank. If it's the first time starting it up, it can take a few goes to prime the fuel line, but once it's primed, you find it's pretty safe and it should turn on, almost flawlessly every time. We've had this running now for about 2 minutes. It's already blowing warm air, so we're going to be nice and comfortable tonight, and we're not going to have to worry about it when we go hit the road. One thing you should also check while you're inside is double check your fire extinguisher. Every van will have a fire extinguisher. A very quick and easy gauge is making sure the pressure is still active on the guide, on the indicator on the outside, and making sure your service interval is compliant and up to date with the Australian standard. If you're unsure, contact the warranty team or the service team and they can give you some indications, or if in doubt, throw it out and get a new one. Part of best practice caravan and camper trailer ownership is keeping up to date with the service interval of your vehicle. The service intervals are indicated clearly in the owner's manual for your particular model, available from the MDC website. You can download them, keep the copy in your van at all times so you are always up to date. If you do need your vehicle serviced at any point, speak to a reputable and qualified service technician. It could be a caravan service centre or a local mechanic who does caravan servicing, and ensure that the job is done properly and to the Australian standards and requirements to make sure your vehicle is compliant and safe at all times. Servicing isn't just best practice, it's really smart. If you're going to head out on a trip, last thing you want to do is have a failure out on the road. So make sure you do it before you take off. Right, we've been through some pretty intense stuff, but in my opinion, it's all critically important and it's part of having a great journey. We're going to finish this up. We're going to grab a beer. After all, we're camping, relax and chill into the night, and again, make sure everything's working as it should, make sure we can get things that we need where we've stored them so we can access them easily, and enjoy a good trip ahead. Well, how's this? What better way to start the day than with a coffee and an incredible view, in this case, out over the scenic rim. That's stunning, clear day, it's fresh, but it's worth it. It's why we buy caravans. so we can get out, check out these cool places and experience things that others just probably never will. We hope you found this shakedown trip helpful and educational, and hopefully you can take 1 or 2 tips out of it that'll help you escape with confidence and escape safely in your MDC caravan and your next adventure. In the meantime, stay tuned. We've got our upcoming Fraser Island and Cape York trip with some special guests, as we mentioned earlier. So please subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for all the action coming up in Off Grid Down Under.